Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of ManageEngine's free training series on Network Configuration Manager. So today we'll be covering the topics of configlets, compliance, role-based access control, and reports. Hi, I'm Ajay. I'm a product expert at Network Configuration Manager, and I'll be presenting today's free training session. So this is the agenda for today's session. We'll be covering configlets and its uses, role-based access control, schedules, reports, and finally, we'll talk about the various integrations of Network Configuration Manager. So let's begin with the first topic, which is configlets. So what are configlets? Configlets are executable configuration or script templates that can be used to push commands to multiple devices for bulk execution or for troubleshooting purposes. So what are configlets used for? Configlets are primarily used for troubleshooting faulty devices, for pushing new configurations, or for modifying configurations on multiple devices simultaneously. For example, let's say that a user wants to enable SNMP version 3 or configure it on a set of devices. So without an automation tool, the user would have to log into each device using tools like PuTTY or Telnet to configure SNMP version 3. So this process would be very tedious and nearly impossible in a large network infrastructure with many devices. So instead, by using configlets, the user can push the enable SNMP v3 command to any number of devices with a single click. So this not only saves time, but also reduces the manual workload for network administrators. So how do you add configlets in Network Configuration Manager? So there's 3 execution modes for adding configlets. So there's the script execution mode, the advanced script execution mode, and the file transfer mode. So in the upcoming slides, we'll look at each of these execution modes in detail, starting with script execution mode. So in script execution mode, commands are executed sequentially on the selected devices. So this mode is suitable for simple commands such as enabling or disabling SNMP on multiple devices. So on the screen here, you can see an example of a script execution mode command. On the left, it's shown in black as it would appear in PuTTY. And on the right, it's displayed in the configured content area of Network Configuration Manager. So let me demonstrate how this works in Network Configuration Manager's UI. So if I go to the Config Automation tab, and I'll go to Configlets. So as you can see, Network Configuration Manager supports both CLI and REST configlets. For REST configlets, we support vendors like Palo Alto, Fortinet, and Aruba, and we're also working on adding more in the future. Now let's talk about CLI configlets. So let's start by showing you how to add a new configlet from scratch. Then we look at examples of each of the execution modes. So to add a new configlet, you just click on the plus symbol here. You'll need to provide a name for the configlet, select the execution mode. We've just selected script execution mode here, but you have a few options. Then you can choose the vendor, and you can add a description to explain the configlet's purpose. Then you can enter the configlet content in the provided space here. Also, if you want Network Configuration Manager to perform a backup before and after executing this template, you can just check this box. Once everything is set, you can just click on Save. And after saving, your configlet will appear on the screen. And from here, you can either execute it immediately, you can schedule it for later, or you can delete it if needed. Now let's walk through an example of script execution mode. So let's use this enable SNMP v1 v2 for Cisco as an example. So as you can see, the name is set. The execution mode is selected as script execution mode, and the vendor is chosen as Cisco, as we're targeting only Cisco devices. So the configlet content is provided here, including settings like the read community and the write community. The backup option is also selected. So Network Configuration Manager will back up before and after executing this template. You can click Save. And as I mentioned earlier, from the screen, you can either execute, schedule, or delete the configlet. So to execute it, you simply click on Execute. Here you'll see the configlet name, the execution mode, and the vendor listed. So you can double check all these details. And here you can also select the template variable, whether you want to apply the same value for all devices or a different value for each device. And you can also provide the read-only and write-only community values here. I'll explain these features in more detail in the slides about configlet execution. So under the devices tab, you can either select a device group, such as all the Cisco routers or switches, or you can select individual devices. So you can select the devices that you want, and the configlet will execute for these specific devices. So since we selected Cisco as the vendor, there's also a Cisco devices tab over here. So you can choose the specific Cisco devices that you need, and you can click on execute. And the configlet will then run for the selected devices, enabling SNMP for them. So that's a quick example of how to use the script execution mode command. So now we'll talk about the advanced script execution mode. So this mode is used for specific scenarios, such as when prompt changes occur after a command execution, or when user confirmation commands require a yes or no, when command execution should stop if there's an error midway, or when there's a need to change the execution flow. So essentially, advanced script execution mode is ideal for handling these more complex requirements. So let's look at an example of advanced script execution mode command. So on the left, you'll see the telnet output, and on the right, you'll see the configlet content as it appears in Network Configuration Manager's UI. So let me walk you through an example of the advanced script execution mode command. So in this example, we'll update the host name of all Cisco devices managed in Network Configuration Manager. So as you can see, the name is already provided. The execution mode is set to advanced script execution mode, and the vendor is selected as Cisco, since Cisco configlet is specifically for Cisco devices. Then the description explains that it updates the host name for Cisco devices, and the configlet content is also listed below. So here you can see commands are provided in sequential order, 1, 2, and 3, and they'll execute it in that order. So again, if you want to back up before and after the execution, you can check this box. And once everything is set up, you can click on Save. After saving, you have the same three options as before. You can execute it immediately, schedule it for later, or you can delete it. So previously, I showed you how to execute a configlet immediately. This time, let's explore the schedule option. So you can click on Schedule. You can provide a name for the schedule. You can choose configlets as the schedule type. Next, you can choose the vendor, Cisco, that's Cisco in our case. And you can select the configlets that you've created. So you can ensure the the execution mode is set correctly, and you can check the backup option if needed. You can also choose the report file format, such as PDF, CSV, or TXT. And finally, you can set the schedule to when this particular configlet will run. So I'll cover the scheduling functionality in more detail in the upcoming slides. Now let's talk about the configlets workflow. So as seen in the earlier example, commands are executed in a specific sequence. So this functionality is supported only in the advanced script execution mode. So here you can see this, you can set the sequence and you can define the conditions such as success and failure to control the flow of execution. So let me show you an example of that in the UI. In this example, we're going to upgrade the Cisco iOS firmware. So in the configlet content area, you'll see a series of sequential steps with conditions for success and failure. So here's how that works. When the configlet is executed, it follows the sequence. If the condition is met, it proceeds to the next step. So that's 6, 7, 8, and 9. And it continues until it reaches the exit point. If there's a failure, the execution stops immediately and the next step is not executed. So this is how the workflow operates in Network Configuration Manager, specifically for advanced script execution mode. Finally, there's the file transfer mode. So in this mode, you can push an entire configuration, whether it's a running configuration, a startup configuration, or both, to the selected devices at once. Let me show you that in the UI. Here's an example of a file transfer for Cisco devices. So as you can see, a complete configuration has been pasted into the configlet content area. So once you've added this configuration, you can click on Save, and you can choose to execute, schedule, or delete it. So this is how file transfer mode works. So let's talk about why we use configlets again. So these configlet modes can be used to automate repetitive network configuration tasks, such as updating device settings, applying security policies, or deploying firmware updates across multiple devices. So by using configlets, network admins can efficiently manage large-scale networks, ensure uniform configurations, and you can quickly implement changes without manually configuring each device. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is configlet execution. So remember when we discussed the template variable section earlier? So this is where you decide to use the same value for all devices or different value for each device. So this feature is helpful when some devices need unique details such as interface ranges or host names. So I'll show you that in the UI. So we'll use the same example where we enabled SNMP v1 and v2 for Cisco devices. So as you can see, we can provide the read-only and write-only read-write community values. So you can just save this configuration. And once it's saved, you can click on execute. And here you can provide the read-only and read-write community values. So if all the devices require the same value, you can select the same value for all devices and enter the values. And this will apply to all the devices. If different devices require different values, you can choose a different value for each device. And then you can upload the file in the specified format. So once uploaded, you can click on preview and then execute. And the details in the file will be applied to each device accordingly. There's also an option here called use first row values for all. So when you check this box, the value in the first row of your file will apply to all the devices. So here's an example of that shown on the slide. So on the left side, you can see the different values for each device, such as the unique host names. And on the right, the use first row value for all box is checked. So in this case, the value from the first row, like the host name, is applied to all the devices. So this is how configlet execution works with different values for each device. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is two-factor configlet execution. So this is a new feature we've recently developed in Network Configuration Manager. So if you've enabled two-factor authentication, you'll receive a TOTP, which is a time-based one-time password, in your authenticator app. So only after entering this TOTP will you be able to execute this configlet. So this feature adds an extra layer of security authentication. If two-factor authentication is enabled, this step will be required for executing any configlet. So this feature is used for automating the application of configuration changes across multiple network devices in a controlled and efficient manner. So that covers everything about configlets in Network Configuration Manager. If you have any questions so far, you can feel free to raise them in the chat panel and our panelists will answer them. Also, if you joined late, don't worry about it. The presentation as well as the recording will be sent to your email in a couple of days. Also, this is just a brief overview of the product. If you'd like a more personalized and in-depth demo of the product, we are offering a free demo, and our panelist will enable a poll shortly. So you can just choose yes, and we can help you set up a NCM for your enterprise. Now let's move on to the next topic of the session, which is compliance. So why is compliance important and why do you need to adhere to certain policies? So compliance is crucial to avoid security vulnerabilities or loopholes in your network environment. It's also mandatory, and non-compliance can lead to legal consequences. So some of the default policies supported in Network Configuration Manager include CIS benchmarks, SOX, HIPAA, and PCI DSS. You can also create your own policies based on your specific requirements. So to create a custom policy, first you need to create a custom rule, then group these rules into rule groups, and then finally these rule groups are associated to policies. So after creating and applying a policy to a device, Network Configuration Manager will run a compliance check to see if the devices adhere to the policy. If not, a violation is triggered. So there's two ways you can create a custom rule. You can either clone an existing rule or add a new one from scratch. So there's three criteria for adding a compliance rule from scratch. There's simple criteria, there's the advanced criteria, and then there's advanced custom criteria. So in the upcoming slides, we'll dive deeper into some of these criteria. So let's start with the simple criteria. So here during NCM's compliance check, you can select options like what should or shouldn't be contained, whether it should be an exact set or not, and you can specify the number of times that it should appear in a device's configuration. Let me show you what that looks like in the UI. So here you can see we have a separate tab for compliance. You can just click on it. And here you'll see the policies that are currently available in NCM. So both the default policies and the ones that you create from scratch will be displayed here. You can also see the number of compliant devices, the violations, and the missing data. And from here, you can run a compliance check as well. So let me show you how to create rules from scratch. Just go to rules, and you can see all the existing rules over here. So to create a new rule, just click on the plus symbol, and you can choose any criteria that you want, simple, advanced, or advanced custom criteria. And you can provide the conditions and the lines. Then you can associate this rule to a rule group and proceed with the policy. So this will be clearer with an example. So let me show you an example for the simple criteria. So here's an example of the simple criteria rule where the public community shouldn't be present. So you set the condition as should not contain any line, and you can unspecified any number of times. So for instance, we've provided SNMP public community RO and SNMP community public RW in this area. And during the compliance check, NCM will check if these two lines are present in the configuration of the devices that are associated with this rule. So if these lines are present, then the rule is in violation, and you'll need to remediate the rule in order to achieve compliance. Otherwise, if the rule is satisfied, it means that the rule is compliant and you can leave it as it is. So you can just click on next. Here you can provide the rule name, a short description for the rule's purpose. You can select the violation severity, whether it's critical, major, or warning. And you can also select a remediation configlet. So for example, we've created a no SNMP public remediation configlet. As you know, configlets are script templates. So whenever this rule becomes a violation, you can use this remediation configlet and you can execute it at any time. So it's always good to create a remediation configlet while creating a rule from scratch. So you can just click on save and your rule will be saved and shown over here. So the next step is to associate these rules with the required rule group. So you can just select the rule. You can click on the hamburger menu here in the top right corner, and you can select associate to rule groups. And you'll see all the available rules here. The rule that you selected will be visible in the on the right hand side. If you want to select any other rules, you can just select them here and click on the right arrow. And you can also select the rule groups that you want. You can click on save. So after saving, these rules will be associated with the rule group. So that was an example of a simple criteria compliance rule. Now let's talk about the advanced criteria. So in this criteria, you can provide conditions such as should contain or should not contain, along with a regular expression pattern. Additionally, you have the option to use and or functions, and that allows you to create multiple criteria with a single rule. Let me show you that in the UI. So here's an example of an advanced criteria compliance rule. So as you can see, the condition is set as should contain or should not contain for specific patterns. And there's another line that uses an or function where it should contain a particular pattern. So here's how it works. During a compliance check, NCM will look for the specific pattern in the configuration file. If the pattern is not found, it moves on to the next condition. It checks the AND operation to see if both the patterns are satisfied. And both of these AND conditions should appear only once in the configuration. If any condition appears more than once, the rule will be violated. So once these conditions are satisfied, NCM will mark the test as compliant or not. So you can click on next. You can provide the rule name and the short description and the violation severity. You can also select the remediation configlet that you've created for this rule. You can click on save, and then you can associate it with the rule groups as shown before. So that was an example of advanced criteria rule. Next up is the advanced custom criteria. So this is basically a mixture of both the simple criteria and the advanced criteria. So here you have the option to use a single block criteria as well as a multi-block criteria. You can also use the AND or OR functions, the regex patterns, and specify the number of times a pattern must be present. So let me show you that in the UI. So let's use this example of the advanced custom criteria. So you can see we have two options here, a single line block or a multi-line block. So let's take this picture as an example for the compliance rule. So here you can see that this particular configuration block starts with interface and ends with an exclamation mark. So here you can specify the configuration block start as interface and the configuration block end as exclamation mark. Additionally, we have the additional block criteria over here, and you can set it. We've set it to should not contain shutdown. So what does this shutdown mean over here? So in a network environment, some devices may be in a shutdown mode, and it might not be necessary to run a compliance check on these devices. So to avoid this, you can provide this option in the advanced custom criteria within the additional block criteria. So here's how that works. If I click on validate here, and if I'll paste the sample configuration content here, and then I'll click on validate. So Network Configuration Manager will check if the configuration block starts with interface and ends with an exclamation mark. If this configuration is satisfied, it moves on to the next criteria to check if the line contains the word shutdown. So if we take this PPT's example again, you can see the word shutdown is present, which means that the device is in a shutdown mode and it'll skip to the next device. Or here, if you can see the shutdown mode is not present, it means that the router switcher device is in the running mode, and NCM will proceed to the next condition to check if the description pattern is present in the configuration or not. So if all these conditions, if all these conditions are satisfied, then the rule is marked as compliant. Otherwise, it throws a violation. So you can just click on next. And then you can provide the name, the description, the severity, and the remediation. You can select the remediation configlet from here. Then you can click on save. Now, if you want to create a rule group from scratch, you can do so by going to the rule groups tab. You can click on the plus symbol, and you can provide the rule group name, a description. You can select the rule groups that you've created, and you can move them to the right-hand side and click on save. And this will associate these rules with the rule group that you've created. So the next step is to associate these rule groups with policies. So here's how you can do it. You can select any number of rule groups. You can click on the hamburger icon on the top right corner, and you can select associate to policies. So here you can select the rule groups that you want and the available policies. You can choose the policies to which these rule groups should be associated, and you can click on save. So after saving, the rules that you created will be associated with the rule group, and those rule groups will be associated with the policies. So the next time NCM runs a policy compliance check, it will check against the rules that you've created or associated with the policy. So if you want to create a policy from scratch, you can go to the policies tab. You can click on the plus symbol. You can provide the policy name, the description. You can select the configuration type, whether it's a running or a startup configuration. You can choose the policy violation criteria, whether any rule in the policy is violated or only if a critical or a major rule is violated. You can select the criteria for this compliance policy that you're creating from here, and you can choose the available rule groups for this policy. Then you can click on Next. You can also select the available devices or the device groups. So if you want to associate certain devices with this compliance policy, you can choose the required devices. You can check this box if you want NCM to run a compliance check immediately after creating the policy. So what that'll do is it'll run the compliance check for the selected devices and determine whether they're compliant or non-compliant. Then you can click on Save. So that's a detailed overview of creating custom rules and policies in Network Configuration Manager for compliance. So that helps network admins automatically detect deviations from desired configurations and take corrective actions, reducing vulnerabilities and maintaining a secure network environment. Now let's talk about remediation configlets. So you can create remediation configlets to resolve any non-compliance issue. So these remediation configlets can be assigned while creating the rule itself. So if a rule is violated, you can simply choose to remediate the specific rule violation immediately using Network Configuration Manager. So let me show you that in the UI. So here, as you can see, for the no public community rule, there's a remediation template tab on the right-hand side, which contains the remediation configlet created for the no SNMP public community. So here you can see that 4 devices are in violation of this particular rule. So you can click on the no SNMP public community configlet created for this. So the non-compliant devices will be displayed, and you can click on Execute. So after clicking on Execute, the remediation template will run for these 4 devices, and it'll run for these devices that are non-compliant with this rule, and they'll become compliant immediately. So this is why it's always a best practice to create a remediation template while creating the rule. So whenever a rule violation occurs, you can execute it from here anytime you want. So that was a quick overview of the remediation configlet. So with the help of this, network admins can automatically fix non-compliant configurations on network devices when a compliance check identifies deviations. Now let's move on to the compliance report. So compliance reports provide in-depth information about which devices are compliant and non-compliant, along with the date and time of the last compliance check. So let me show you that in the UI. You can go to Reports and click on Compliance Report. So here you can see a pie chart that represents how many devices are in violation, how many devices are compliant, and how many devices data are not available. So it separates the violating devices and the compliant devices into separate tabular columns for better understanding. So you can see the violating devices listed over here, along with the number of critical, major, and warning violations, as well as how many are compliant and when they were last checked. So if you click on the arrow next to the host name, you can select a policy, and you can drill down further. You can drill down further to see which policy is not compliant and how many devices are non-compliant for that particular policy. So if you scroll down even further, you can see the device policy violation section. So if any remediation template has been created, it will be shown here. And you can click on that specific remediation template to remediate the rule violations. So also these reports can be exported in various formats over here, like PDF, CSV, or Excel. And it can also be sent via an email using the options here in the top right corner. So the next topic is role-based access control. So what exactly is role-based access control? So essentially in a network team, you may have different roles such as a senior admin and operators working under them. So with role-based access control, you can assign specific roles to each user, or you can restrict them to specific devices. For example, if a user is given an operator role, their access will be limited to the devices assigned to them, and they won't have access to any other devices. If an operator makes any changes to the assigned devices, the admin will immediately receive a notification, and the admin can then choose to accept or reject these changes as needed. So let me show you a representation of how the role-based access control works. So here we have an operator who makes changes to a configuration file. So these configuration changes and all the relevant details are then immediately sent to an admin. The admin then can then decide to approve or reject these changes from their end. And once the admin makes their decision, an approval or rejection notification is sent to the operator immediately. So this is the cycle of how role-based access control works in Network Configuration Manager. Now let me show you this in the UI. You can go to Settings and User Management. So as you can see, there are these are the users present in Network Configuration Manager, and their details are shown over here. So to create a new user, you can click on Add User here. For example, I'll just go to one of the already created users called Sam. So here you can provide the role. For example, Sam is an operator. You can enter the username and also the email ID for that person, and along with the password. So after creating this user, you can click Next. And on this screen, you can assign specific devices or device groups to them. For instance, for Sam, let's assign only the Cisco device router group. And only the Cisco router devices will be now accessible to this operator, and no other devices will be available. Then you can click on Save to confirm. Also, if any user leaves the team or the organization, you can also choose to delete the user from the screen here. So now let me show you how an operator makes these changes, and how an administrator receives a notification. So for that, I'll just log out of my administrator account and log in as Sam. So now I've logged in as Sam, the operator. So if I go to inventory, you can see that Sam only has access to the Cisco router group in the inventory, and no other devices or groups are visible to him. So suppose Sam wants to make a change to any of these devices. Let's say I want to make a configuration change here. So here, let's say I want to delete a couple of these lines. I'll just do that. I can just enter the draft name, and I can click on Save and Upload. So when I do that, it says I don't have upload permission. So for that, I'll have to click on Upload, and it will place the request to the administrator. So once I've done that, I can also view the upload request by going to Config Automation and Upload Requests. And over here, I can see the latest upload requests that I have. If I click on it, I can also see which which respective device I've made the change to. So now let me show you how that works, how that looks from the admin's perspective. I'll log out and I'll log back in as the administrator. So I've logged back in as the admin. So now if I click on this notification bell icon on the top right corner here, I can see that I can see the notification that the request, and it shows which device it shows which device the changes are for. So if I click on that, and if I click on Show Draft, it displays the exact lines that were modified over here. So here, if I click on that, I can see the 2 lines which I've deleted. And then from here, I can choose to approve or reject this change. And if I choose to approve it, I can also choose to execute it directly from here. So that's how role-based access control works in Network Configuration Manager. So this feature minimizes the risk of unauthorized changes or access to network configurations. It enhances security, and it also ensures accountability through controlled access and audit trails. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is tags. So tags in Network Configuration Manager are similar to hash tags. So you can create a tag for a specific location, and you can assign devices, schedules, configuration, compliance policies, and users associated with that location. Excuse me. So for example, if you have a location in Los Angeles, you can create a tag called Los Angeles. And by assigning this tag to specific devices, users, and other entities, only the devices and the settings associated with the Los Angeles tag will be accessible to those users. So let me show you how that works in the UI. Go to Settings and Tags. So here you can see that I've created a tag called Los Angeles. So you can click on View. And here you'll see the 4 devices that are present under this tag. Additionally, you can also see any configlets, schedule compliance policies, change notifications, and users that are associated with this tag. So while creating a user in Network Configuration Manager, you can assign a tag to limit their access to only specific devices that are associated with this tag. So let me demonstrate that. You can go to Settings and User Management. And let me go back to Sam's profile here. So if I go to this screen, so instead of providing access to any specific devices or device groups, I can select Tag, and I can choose the Los Angeles tag here. So I can click on Save. And now only the devices under the Los Angeles tag will be accessible to Sam. So this is how tags work in Network Configuration Manager. So this helps network admins organize devices, users, and configurations based on specific criteria like location, department, or device type. So that in turn simplifies management tasks by enabling network admins to apply actions, policies, or compliance checks efficiently to grouped entities. And that ensures consistency and reduces the administrative overhead. Now let's talk about custom columns. So in Network Configuration Manager, you can create up to 3 custom columns to add more specific information to your devices. So let me show you that in the UI. You can go to Settings and Device Management and Custom Column. So here you can create custom columns such as location, customer, and any other custom column that you need. So after setting up these columns, you can click on Update. And now when you check any device in the inventory, let me click on this device, for instance. So here you can see that the custom columns like location, customer, and any other columns that I've made are visible here. So this is how custom columns are set up and used. So these custom columns allow administrators to add specific and user-defined attributes to the devices. Now let's discuss schedules. So Network Configuration Manager offers various scheduling options for different task categories, such as configuration backups, report generation, compliance checks, configlet execution, device discovery, keeping startup and running configurations in sync, and PCI review. So these scheduling options are particularly useful for tasks that need to be performed on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So since it's impractical for users to remember and manually perform each task regularly, the scheduling feature allows you to set the date and time, and the product will automatically handle the rest. So let me show you how that works in the UI. Go to Config Automation and click on Schedule. From here, you can click on the plus symbol. Here you can enter the schedule name. You can choose the schedule type. For example, let's select configuration backup. And you can also choose the device group or any individual devices based on your preference. So under report notification, you have two options here. You can send via email or save the report. So if you'll select send email, you need to provide the email addresses separated by commas, as well as the email subject. So once the scheduled task is complete, Network Configuration Manager will immediately send the report via email to the specified addresses. And that allows you to stay updated on the execution even outside of business hours. If you prefer not to receive email notifications, you can click on Save Report instead. So in this case, NCM will save the report, and you can view it the next time you log into Network Configuration Manager. So here at the bottom, there are 5 scheduling frequency options available. There's hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and once. So based on your needs, you can select the appropriate option, and Network Configuration Manager will execute the task at the scheduled time. So this was an overview of the schedule feature. So the scheduling feature helps automate routine tasks like configuration backups, compliance checks, report generation, and it ensures they run consistently at predefined intervals without manual intervention. Next topic is configuration search. So the configuration search feature is essential for locating a specific string, word, or pattern within a configuration file. So for example, if you have a large configuration file with over 1,000 lines, manually scrolling through it to find a particular keyword would be inefficient. So instead, you can choose the configuration search option to find any keyword or pattern instantly. Let me show you that in the UI. From inventory, you can click on this third icon over here, the one with the magnifying glass. Here you can enter your search query. You can also click on the advanced tab here, and you can set conditions like contains or does not contain, line starts with or line ends with. So you can enter any specific line or keyword that you're looking for, and you can click on search. So Network Configuration Manager will then search for the specified keyword or pattern across all the configurations. Manager will then search for the specified keyword or pattern across all the configurations. And if found, it will be listed over here. So that's how configuration search works. So exclude criteria allows you to specify certain elements that NCM should ignore when detecting changes and triggering alarms. So for instance, if you don't want the clock time or a specific date to be considered a change in the configuration file, you can set the criteria to exclude these for a particular device. So as a result, NCM will not trigger alarms or show these elements as changes, and that helps reduce redundant notifications for minor or non-essential updates. So let me show you how that works. Go to Config Automation and click on Exclude Criteria. So in NCM, there's two types of criteria. There's the line exclude and the block exclude criteria. So for the line exclude criteria, let's look at an example where the clock time is excluded. So as you can see, for the criteria for this device, exclude clock time. So you can click on Save. And for this device, those lines will not be considered as changes in configuration versions. So for the block exclude criteria, let's see an example. So here you can provide a template, the template name. You can specify the configuration block start and block end, and NCM will exclude any changes within this block. You can also add any additional criteria like should contain or should not contain, and then you can click on Save. So that's how you configure exclude criteria in Network Configuration Manager. So the next topic is alarms. So alarms are used to immediately notify users of important updates or failures. Let me show you that in the UI. We have a separate alarms tab over here. And here you'll see a list of all the active alarms. So in the all alarms tab, you can see there are over 2,000 alarms that are currently active in Network Configuration Manager. And these alarms are triggered for various events like device configuration changes, backup failures, firmware vulnerabilities, and more. So the alarms will pop up immediately, allowing you to see what alarms are present and the details of the events that you've created. So this overview helps you stay informed of critical events in your network. Now let's talk about the show commands feature. So the show commands feature in Network Configuration Manager allows you to save frequently used commands as templates, so you don't have to type them in manually each time in a terminal. So you can execute these commands directly from the Network Configuration Manager's interface. So let me show you how that works. Go to Settings, Device Management, and click on Show Commands. So here you'll see a list of the existing show commands. So to create a new command, click on Add, and you can provide a command alias, example show version, and you can enter the command. You can select the vendor and then click on Save. So to execute a saved command, you can go to Inventory. You can click on any of the devices. And over here at the top from the Actions tab, you can navigate to Execute and click on Show command. Here you can choose the desired command from the dropdown. So for example, I've selected Show version, and the results will be displayed directly in the Network Configuration Manager's UI without needing a separate telnet session. So you can also export this output if needed. And this feature is not limited to show version commands. You can also show system, you can show logging, show IP traffic, etc. So this is how the show commands feature works in the Network Configuration Manager. Now let's talk about reports. So Network Configuration Manager provides various types of reports for auditing purposes, such as network reports, configuration reports, vulnerability reports, user reports, and more. So let me show you what that looks like in the UI. So we have a reports tab here. Just click on it. And under network reports, there are these specific reports available. In configuration reports, there are these multiple report types are listed. Vulnerability and user reports include reports related to firmware vulnerabilities like the CVE report or the exposed devices report. And under other reports, we have the end of life, end of sales detail reports, and the compliance report. So let me give you an example of a hardware inventory report. So for this device with this IP address, you can view details like the serial, the series model, the OS type, the version, the serial number, etc. And you can filter this report by device group, or you can export it in formats like PDF, CSV, Excel, or email. So another example is the CVE ID report. So this provides details of firmware vulnerabilities, including CVE IDs, base scores, the number of affected devices, as well as the patch links. So you can click on these links to access the patch details. So that's an overview of reports in Network Configuration Manager. So this reports feature provides comprehensive insights into network device configurations, compliance status, and vulnerabilities, and that enables administrators to make informed decisions, identify issues proactively, and maintain regulatory compliance. Now let's talk about the UI of Network Configuration Manager. So NCM offers an informative, customizable dashboard that provides a bird's eye view of all the current operations in a widget format. So let me show you that in the UI. You can just click on Dashboard. And here you can see the running operations in Network Configuration Manager. And you can drag and drop any of these widgets according to your preference. And you can click on Save if you want to retain this layout. The dashboard is fully dynamic and fully customizable according to your preference. So that's the dashboard in Network Configuration Manager. So next up, we have integrations. So Network Configuration Manager supports both in-house and third-party integrations. So let's look at first at the third-party integrations. So one is a Password Manager Pro. So that's a credential vault software that helps manage credentials for multiple devices, especially useful in larger networks. And we also have support for a bunch of ticketing softwares. So that includes integrations with Service Desk Plus, Service Plus Cloud, ServiceNow, and PagerDuty. So for example, when a configuration backup fails or a configuration approval request is generated, a ticket is created in Service Desk Plus, and the users can manage requests from here. We also have an option to add devices from the ServiceNow CMDB to the Network Configuration Manager's inventory. And we also have a latest integration with PAM 360. I'll talk more about that towards the end of the session. Now let's look at the authentication supported in Network Configuration Manager. So first is the radius authentication. So that's a client server protocol that allows users to log into Network Configuration Manager using remote authentication. Next is the AD authentication. So this allows users to authenticate within NCM without needing an external identity management tool. Next is the SAML authentication. So that's an XML-based standard for exchanging authentication credentials between a service provider and an identity provider, supporting single sign-on. Lastly, we have the two-factor authentication. So that adds an extra layer of security by requiring a TOTP from an authenticator app to log in. Let me show you how that works in the UI. So go to Settings and Authentication. So here you can see the options for radius server settings, the AD authentication, SAML authentication, as well as two-factor authentication. So to enable two-factor authentication, you can just select this box here, and you can set the trusted browser duration and click on Save. So if you don't have an authenticator app, you can opt for the email option to receive a TOTP via email. So this covers the authentication in Network Configuration Manager. Now let's look at how Network Configuration Manager can be used as an add-on to different other ManageEngine products. So first is Op Manager. So as you might be knowing, Op Manager is a comprehensive network monitoring tool. So if you're already using Op Manager, you can add Network Configuration Manager as an add-on, and that will give you the combined benefit of monitoring and configuration management within the same UI. So next is NetFlow Analyzer. So NetFlow Analyzer is a bandwidth and traffic management tool, and you can also add Network Configuration Manager to NetFlow Analyzer for the combined functionality without changing the UI. So that brings us towards the end of the presentation. So if you liked the presentation so far, please do give it a rating in the poll that our panelist will be sharing shortly. Also, if you're already a user of Network or a customer of Network Configuration Manager, you can receive a $25 gift card by leaving a review. So if you're satisfied with your service, please provide your review using the link provided by the panelist. So also, we're excited to announce the integration of Network Configuration Manager with PAM 360. So this provides a unified platform that centralizes credential management, that automates credential rotation and syncs, and enhances your security posture. So if you want to learn more about this integration, you can follow the link that our panelist will share. I'm also pleased to announce that Network Configuration Manager is now FIPS compliant. So if you want to learn more about this, a panelist will share a relevant link to the page detailing the FIPS compliance, so you can learn more about it. So thank you all for joining this pre-training session. I hope you found it useful. If you have any other questions, please share them in the chat panel. and our panelists will be happy to answer them. Also, once again, if you're interested in a more in-depth look at the product, we are offering a free personalized demo of Network Configuration Manager. And if you'd like to sign up for this, you can just answer the poll that our panelists will share. So thank you all for joining, and we'll see you in the next season of Network Configuration Manager's free training series.